And today I just wanted to show this little depiction. This was shared on another channel, and I thought I'd just draw a little version of what I saw. This pertains to the current situation we're experiencing. And this big pile here represents a giant pile of rice, or the world's population. And here we have, give or take, 8 billion people in the world, represented as this massive pile of rice. Now, of course, these piles won't be to scale, but it will serve the purpose. Now, out of 8 billion people, 16 million people die of cardiovascular disease. And in this smaller pile, 1.6 million people die every year of diarrhea. And this could be a variety of different reasons, but nonetheless attributed to this condition. And 1.2 million people die in cars. Here we have a smaller pile of 800,000 deaths attributed to suicide. And here we have 1 grain of rice. 1 grain compared to this pile that represents 3 pounds. And here 1 grain has supposedly kicked the bucket due to this modern day epidemic. It has not even reached the number attributed to the common flu. That is something we live with every day. And for this grain of rice, a small select few have decided to shut down the world's economy. If we were really concerned about deaths, we would eliminate the automobile just as quickly as the controllers took action in this modern instance. However, this is even more alarming, that such action would be taken for such a ridiculous statistic, and this leads me to believe that something much greater is going on. And here, as Trump is claiming that we've passed our peak, protesters are taking to the streets nationwide, bombarding their capitals, and similar to Henry David Thoreau, I always encourage civil disobedience. And with that said, welcome. Here we're going to look at the Ottawa, Canada Library of Parliament building. And today's video is brought to you by Meow Mix. And we did look at this briefly in the last video. And we have also looked at the Parliament building in past videos. Here's a little look at that, and a fascinating building. And you can see my past video, which I'll link below if you want to delve into the Parliament building itself. But today we're going to have a little look at the library attached to this Parliament building. According to the falsities, the Library of Parliament is the main information repository and research resource for the Parliament of Canada, and is the last untouched part of the larger building's original incarnation after it burnt down in 1916. Designed by Thomas Fuller, the building is inspired by the British Museum Reading Room. And here we can see the inside of that. And the construction of the library began in 1859 and completed in 1876. They tell us in 1861 the work was halted, and in 1869 the builders discovered that they didn't have the technical knowledge to build the domed roof. In the middle of construction, realizing they're not sure how they're even going to construct this, according to the narrative. This meant that Thomas Fairbairn Engineering Company of Manchester had to be contracted to provide a prefabricated dome within a few weeks. Mind you, this is 1866. I mean, here just calling upon this firm, and this gave the Library of Parliament the distinction of being the first building in North America to have a state-of-the-art wrought iron roof. Further, they tell us, in 1883, the library's 300 gas lights were converted to electricity. So here in this short period, completing the building in 1876, they tell us, and less than 10 years later, they're converting the gas lighting into electricity. And they tell us everything went over budget, and within only 12 years, the entire roof was stripped of its slate shingles in a tornado that hit Parliament in 1888. Since then, the roof has been clad in copper. And of course, the building was constantly threatened by fire. The first fire in 1916, seems the building was spared. And eventually in 1952, fire did enter the library. It was then necessary to perform structural work and all kinds of other renovations. So pretty amazing for 1866 to even conceive of building something like this. 1866. Now what was going on in Ottawa? What could the population have been? And according to these demographics, really beginning in 1901, we have a population of 100,000. And really seeming unnecessary to build a library like this when you're just starting out your town, probably the population being closer to 50,000, and more realistically, probably 25. We can have a little bird's eye view of the city here in 1876. And here in the center, we see what appears to be the Parliament building and the library, and pretty much everything laid out to perfection. Just starting out with amazing buildings and well-engineered roads and city layout. An impressive shaping of the river coast here and here. And here in present day we can see the parliamentary building still standing after several fires. And here a picture in present day. Just absolutely magnificent, amazing structures all around, much to explore in this fine city. And we can see modern buildings in the background, the finest cubes we can produce, sprinkled with a much older time period. I look forward to exploring much more in this city. And I'm always amazed at these museums. Often much more impressive are the buildings compared to anything housed inside of them. And here they're showing us the University of Ottawa, the oldest post-secondary institution in the city, established in 1848, and universities seeming to be quick to snatch up and repurpose many of these magnificent buildings. So again, let's be realistic here. Let's look at the technology in 1866, and what are these people thinking, if we're to believe the narrative, to embark on the idea of constructing something like this? Completely unreasonable to consider the possibility of doing much more than things like this with a horse, or things like this. Clearly at a time that they had not figured out how to fire up all the inherited tech left behind by the prior civilization. And let's consider today, with all the modern equipment that we have, what do we build? We build economical cubes, very hive-like, repeating the same pattern over and over, very economical and unpleasant to the eye, certainly in comparison to buildings like this. And recently I was prompted to have a little look at this particular building, a windowless skyscraper found in New York City, and we can have a little look at that here. Very interesting, and a first for me. What could the purpose of such a building be? Located at 33rd Thomas Street, looking pretty eerie and suspicious. And here we can see some beautiful old world buildings in the background in comparison to this modern junk we see here. And what do they tell us about this building? Formerly the AT&T building, it is a 550-foot tall skyscraper in Lower Manhattan. The building is an example of brutalist architectural style, said to have developed in the late 1950s. Here they glaze over the origins, and finally we're told the building has also been described as the likely location of a national security agency, a mass surveillance hub codenamed Titan Point. The location was previously the site of cast iron buildings, typical of the area, the facades of which were preserved prior to demolition. The building was a core part of the AT&T Long Lines department. It was completed in 1974 and is often described as one of the most secure buildings in America. It was designed to be self-sufficient with its own gas and water supplies along with generation capabilities and protected from nuclear fallout for up to 2 weeks after a blast. Very interesting, speaking of the self-sufficiency, and really what we all should be considering in such times. It doesn't matter if it was this false scenario and scare that has been created. It could have been anything, and people should be self-sufficient and less dependent on the system, regardless of what's going on. And when it comes to living self-sufficiently, I found that one can produce almost all of one's own needs. Perhaps the most difficult thing to produce would be something like toilet paper. And using one's imagination, one could find different ways to perform the function of this cheap disposable product. And if you want to know more about living self-sustainably, do check out my book, where I teach you how to live off the grid, free of bills, and detached from this corrupt system in which we live. And you can find the link for that below. And here I just wanted to share a comment by Wida, and they're telling us about this palace in Amsterdam. And I thank you for the share, and we can have a little look at that here. Seeming as if this could have had any designation, cathedral, parliament building, nothing but the most important of designations. A fine wonder and a glimpse of the old world. What could they tell us about this building and what was going on in 1850? Either the people of the past were absolutely genius and we have degraded as a civilization, or these buildings were not built by our people at all. And what we see down here are a primitive and simple people pushing carts around, holding markets in the streets, and really having no need for buildings of this nature. Not then, in 1850, or even now. And what do they tell us about this palace of popular diligence? A large exhibition hall in Amsterdam. The building was constructed between 1859 and 1864. Just blasting this baby out in about 6 years. It was designed by an architect named Cornelius Outshorn, inspired by the Crystal Palace in London. In 1929, it was destroyed by fire, of course. And here we can have a little look at the Crystal Palace, always remarkable, and once again, similar to the World's Fairs, this exhibition took place from May 1st to October 15th in 1851. So to construct this again for 6 months of usage, how and why? Completely ridiculous and very tragic and not surprising. that this beauty, constructed of what appears to be non-flammable materials, would burn down. I'm not even sure how I would proceed to burn this structure down, even if I wanted to. And here I just wanted to feature a little showcase of Capitol buildings. And this is a little website that I found here. And it looks like a very nice showcase of Capitol buildings found throughout our nation. And I would love such a showcase of Capitol buildings found throughout the world. But for now, very excited to see a nice handful. Here we have Manchester, New Hampshire, a true wonder, perhaps gold on the dome. Austin, Texas, a real beauty with this sandstone hue. Absolutely remarkable. This is a first for me. And Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, a little taste with some massive sculpting on either side here compared to this man. And Columbus, Ohio, really seeming incomplete, probably inherited mid-construction, or the top may have been blown off. Very beautiful. And Indianapolis, Indiana. And we have looked at Indianapolis in past videos. A very beautiful square in the center of town. And Springfield, Illinois. A superb structure, almost with a kind of yellow hue. And what looks like a center point that probably housed some sort of obelisk or something, adding to the technological feature that many of these buildings appear to display. And Des Moines, Iowa. We love our Des Moines capital, the only 5-domed golden Capitol building in the nation. And really cool the way they took this shot. And Helena, Montana. Always fun to look at the Capitol buildings built by cowboys. Perhaps Tartarian cowboys. And Olympia, Washington. Very appropriate. And I'm not sure what we're seeing here, but very remarkable. Sacramento, California. A real beauty. And Carson City, Nevada. Again, the architecture of the Old West. And of course Salt Lake City, Utah. Just mind-blowing. And I've yet to take a little peek inside in person one of these days. Not sure if they would let my dog in. And Augusta, Maine. Way up there in Maine. Very important. Very same style. And Providence, Rhode Island. This is just a beauty. Really reminding me of the building in Amsterdam we had a look at earlier in the video. Super techy with its 5 concentrated domes. Totally unnecessary for a government municipality. Way over the top. Whereas one simple floor would suffice today and yesterday. In Cheyenne, Wyoming. Again, the architecture of cowboys. Who is a cowboy to break tradition? Nothing less than the Corinthian column in rugged Wyoming. Very beautiful. And Dover, Delaware. Not as impressive as the others, but nonetheless the architecture of the old world. Always made of brick, with a beautiful facade over the top. And perhaps this was a project on a budget, but we know that there's no such thing in the old world. So that's it for today. I do thank you for joining me, and do have a blessed day. Please like, comment, and subscribe. And I thought I'd jump back in for a little bonus segment. Let's just have a little look at this Parliament building in Ottawa. And here we are. And we can see even in the early depiction, this type of canal was already here, way back. And here we have the grand and glorious Parliament building. And maybe we can just park ourselves right down here. And here a little peek at the stonework, and of course the Antiquitech. And clearly some scorching has taken place here, and very impressive blockwork, unperplexed by the use of non-uniform stones. And we can see here they fit like a perfect glove in a very early time period of the 1860s. Truly masterful, using different types of stone and again fitting them like a glove. And what I couldn't help but notice was that many of these structures of old seem to be sitting on top of a much older stone. And this much older stone appears to be the remains of much older buildings. And as we can see in photos in the past, is that we do have cities underneath our cities. And it seems to me as if many of these grand buildings were simply built on top of the remains of buildings from prior resets. And really a pretty smart tactic, as we've been told, a wise man builds his home on a rock, or in this case, an ancient building. Real quickly, I thought I'd take a little dive into New Mexico here and examine this old star fort we see in the middle of nowhere, out in the deep desert. And I've shown this in a past video, but here it is again. Simply the imprint of a star fort, and anybody that's looked at star forts recognizes this pattern, and it seems like one could approach this off the main road. And when we click on this image, this is what we get. Some old brick ruins out here in the middle of nowhere. And it appears as if perhaps the Park Service has applied some covering over this brick, either to preserve or to hide the true origins of these ruins. And down here we can see some blockwork, very interesting. And back here as well, larger blockwork underneath the brick. And this is pretty fascinating. Not what I was expecting to see around this star fort. Originally I just clicked on this picture here, and this is what it shows us. Just a whole bunch of ruins, and of course the narrative may tell us that this is the remains of some fort, but I don't think so. Here these are found around this star fort that is pretty much unknown and very fascinating. Something to explore a little more in another video. So that's it, I promise. Until next time, God bless.